I need to back up the truck a little bit because last chapter I talked to you a little bit about the Taylor Aero Car 3 when Eli went to the Museum of Flight with his dad in Seattle. And here it is, the Taylor Aero Car 3, a car that could convert into a plane in about 5 minutes. So today, chapter 6 is all going to be about relationships with your dads. And sometimes those relationships, you got to take the good with the bad. How many of you have complicated relationships with your dad? All right, well, that song was talking about expectations that you have with your dad. Here's a picture of my dad. Here's my dad as a young man in the Navy, and then kind of as an older guy getting ready to retire from Boeing, where he worked for 35 years. And then this is the last family picture that we have before my dad passed away, December 5th of 2012. And so there's my dad and my mom, and then my 3 brothers, and I'm in the middle there. So if you have complicated relationships with your dad, there's things about your dad that you like, and then there's things about your dad that, aren't always that great. Well, just know that you're in good company because Eli feels the exact same way with his dad, Michael Martin. And so we're going to start out chapter number 6. It's hard to believe, but we're almost a quarter of the way through Fly Car. And this chapter is called Family Tree. On Saturday afternoon, Eli once again made his way to the old barn out back. It seemed to be having a magnetic pull on him these days. Eli couldn't quite explain it, but he wanted to see the 1984 Martin Mercurio one more time. If you remember, that's his dad's most prized possession. He was pleased to see that Grady was near the barn. He was taking a break from cutting the grass on the riding mower. "I've been thinking all morning about that trick you pulled off, catching that poor defenseless fish in the tire," Grady joked. "That was no trick, Grady. That was ingenuity and invention at its finest," Eli replied confidently. "Guess you're right. Hey, how do you know where the key is to your dad's car?" Eli asked sheepishly. "I wouldn't do that if I were you," Grady warned. "I'm not going to drive it. I just want to see certain feature, honestly," Eli pleaded. "Scout's honor?" "Promise." Eli held up his fingers to make the Boy Scout salute. Grady whisked some golden-colored hay off the barn floor to reveal a trap door. He lifted the rusty latch, creak, and tugged. The door finally gave way after a few squeaks. Grady reached down and carefully pulled out a slate-gray plastic fishing tackle box. He flipped its tarnished brass levers open. Click. And then removed an oversized, worn silver key. But it wasn't just any key. This was the magical key that could open the door to Eli's dad's first and favorite car. Next, they approached the car. After lifting off the dusty cover, they gently laid it on a nearby workbench. The cover, that is. Eli put the key into the driver's side door and turned it clockwise, holding his breath. The door opened, and Eli smoothly slid into the black leather seat. For the second time in 2 days, Eli grasped the leather steering wheel with his hands. He felt like a trapeze artist reaching out for a swinging bar during a circus performance. Then his clammy hands reached the key into the ignition, just far enough to hear a click. Rotating the key forward ever so slightly caused the dashboard to come to life. The needle measuring the amount of gas spiked up to full, and green lights flashed on, signaling that the Mercurio was more than willing and ready to go and move after all these years in hibernation. Bells chimed, bing, bing, letting Eli know that his sports car still had something left to prove. He could hardly contain his excitement. Eli knew that if either his mom and dad ventured down into the barn at this exact moment, he would be grounded for the rest of spring break. But he didn't care. This was just too good an opportunity to pass up. Eli's curiosity spread to the car's accessories. He was particularly interested in the automatic seatbelt feature. Whenever a passenger in the Mercurio closed the door, the seatbelts would instantaneously slide into the correct locking position on the passenger's shoulders. So it would go on a little sliding conveyor belt and then cross over. Transfixed, Eli repeated the automatic maneuver multiple times, watching carefully how the belt kept moving efficiently along a tracking mechanism by the edge of the window. His eyes blinked as if he were a spy camera recording classified documents on a secret mission. Then, just as quickly as he had gotten into the car, he turned off the ignition, pulled out the key, and flipped it back to Grady for safekeeping. "What were you thinking about back there, son?" Grady asked. He wasn't sure what this was all about. But Eli was snapped back to reality and said, "Grady, what did you want to be when you grew up as a kid?" "That was a long time ago, Eli." Grady glanced out the window. "I've got time. It's spring break, you know." Eli got out of the car, shut the door, and sat down on a nearby stool. "Be careful what you ask for, Junior," Grady smirked to the 10-year-old. "Go ahead. Dinner isn't for another hour," Eli settled. "Good, because this story is going to take a good long while." "Good, because this story could take a while?" Grady said. "Fine. My grandfather, Clarence Johnson the First, worked at the old Packard plant down in downtown Detroit for over 30 years. The plant opened in 1907 and was considered state-of-the-art car facility." "What does the word state-of-the-art mean?" Grady asked. Eli asked. "It means it was the best of its kind, son. There were no finer cars than Packard's," Grady said. During the plant's heyday, it employed over 40,000 skilled workers on campus that spanned 35 acres. My grandpa was one of them. He thought that life couldn't get much better than that. 40,000? That's a lot of people," Eli said. I know. Well, the fairy tale came crashing down in 1956 when the plant stopped manufacturing luxury sedans. Lickety-split, my grandpa was handed his walking papers. Grady paused for a sec. "What about the plant?" Eli inquired. "Well, today it's abandoned. About the only people who go there are graffiti artists, industrial paintballers, and scrappers." "What's a scrapper?" "Scrappers are like pirates of the city, son. They'll pull anything valuable off a building. Copper pipes, electrical wire, fuse boxes, anything that they can get their hands on, and turn around and sell for a couple of bucks." "Oh, that sounds kind of fun, actually," Eli said. "But sorry for the detour. Back to your story." "Well, my grandpa was running out of unemployment benefits when he received a phone call from your great-grandfather asking him to come work for Martin Motors. All the men in our family have been company men ever since." "What's a company man?" "Well, it's someone who works for the same company the whole entire life. You dig?" "Did you follow in your family's footsteps?" Eli asked. "Certainly did. I worked for Martin Motors, Assembly Line 1, first shift for over 30 years, Grady announced proudly. "Did you ever want to do anything else?" Eli quizzed. Grady hesitated. "I've never told anyone else this story, so I'm trusting you'll keep it between the two of us. You understand?" Eli nodded. Grady continued. "When I was a little kid, I wanted to be an astronaut. Man, I loved everything about NASA. The crisp white spacesuits, the whole mission to the moon. I even drank Tang. I begged my mom to put some in my stocking at Christmas, and it would usually last until my birthday when I asked for some more." "What's Tang?" Eli asked. "Tang is like old school Sunny D," Grady responded. "Oh, okay, I got it. Go on," Eli said. "Well, I did pretty well in school, so my teachers encouraged me to go to George Washington Carver Technical High School. It was a magnet school for science and math. Best high school in the city. Carver Tech was a lottery, and my ticket was punched." That sounds cool, Eli said. It was, Grady said. I made good on my opportunity and did pretty well in school, son. Come senior year, I was top of my class and had already accepted a full ride scholarship to the University of Michigan in the fall. I was living large and in charge. But then fate struck again. What happened? Eli was riveted to the story of his family. Well, you see, my dad loved bacon, Grady chuckled under his breath. My pop ate bacon at almost every meal. Bacon and eggs for breakfast, BLTs for lunch, bacon cheeseburgers every Friday night for dinner. Man, oh man, my dad sure loved his bacon. I like bacon too, Eli said hesitantly. Come Tuesday, the week of high school graduation, Dad was working the morning shift as usual, doing his job of assembling the bumpers to the chassis, when he commented to a co-worker that he wasn't feeling too well. But he kept attaching his 200 bumpers to the chassis just like every other shift. Then he punched his time card, picked up his lunch pail from the locker, and drops dead right there on the spot. Eli was stunned. He stayed quiet for a whole minute, wondering if this could ever happen to his own father. He worked so hard. What did you do? Do? Well, I gave my class valedictorian commencement address on Friday evening, buried my father on a Saturday morning, and began working at Martin Motors on Monday. Never looked back. Well, why? I thought you wanted to be an astronaut, Eli said. I did want to be an astronaut, but there was my mom and 2 baby sisters to look after, so it was time for me to become the man of the house, if you know what I mean. You could probably fill in the blank of how the story ends. I picked up right where my father left off, Grady said proudly. Did you feel cheated on your dream? The past is a nice place to visit, kid, but I wouldn't want to live there. Eli looked dismayed. Hey, little man, it wasn't all bad, Grady said. Your grandpa heard the story about my father and hired me first thing Monday morning. He even gave me the same shift my dad had, which I thought was pretty generous considering I didn't have any seniority at the United Auto Workers. What's the United Auto Workers? Eli asked. A union. It's a group that helps employees make their working conditions better and helps negotiate contracts for their employees so they get a fair deal. How about your dad? Eli asked wistfully. Did you have a good relationship with your father? Okay, I guess. My dad wasn't much of a talker, you see. But, my oh my, he sure loved his Detroit sports teams. Lions, Tigers, Pistons, you named it. He watched them all on that big television. Wasn't that big into watching games myself, so I guess that made us have to stretch a little harder to find some common ground. You know what I mean? Grady looked up and locked eyes with Eli. I do, Eli said knowingly. What was your favorite part of your job? Well, about 10 years into my career, your father started working at the company as a summer intern, as a way to learn the family business. He was just in his 20s then. Like you, he was a pretty sharp cookie and curious as well. Well, that was before I was born, Eli said. Ah, yeah, Grady said. One day your dad comes down to the assembly line on his lunch break, started asking folks what kind of cars that Martin Motors should be making. All the other employees were hemming and hawing, not really saying much. I guess they were kind of nervous, and didn't want to seem too pushy, pushing back on the boss's kid. That was so nice of him to ask the workers what they thought, Eli said. Well, your dad was just about to leave when I bolstered up the courage to say one word. Minivan, Grady said. It was a concept I'd been thinking about for a while, and it might have caught your father's attention because he turned around and said, Who said that? Wow, I can't believe you had the guts to speak up, Eli said. I said, I did, sir. And I tipped my hard hat high up on my forehead so he could get a good look at my face. He asked me what a minivan was. They're everywhere now, but this was before anyone had the idea. How did you come up with that, Eli asked. Well, I'd been working at Martin Motors assembly line number 1 for going on 10 years, and this was the 70s. We made one of the best station wagons around, but it had gone out of style, if you know what I mean. Styles change, people's tastes are selective, and there's one thing for certain, Grady paused dramatically. What's that? Eli asked, inquisitively. Well, people are going to have families. Some of them are going to have quite large ones, and these families are going to need to get from point A, over here, to point B, over there. I told your dad all that. He seemed impressed and took me aside so we could talk a little further. What did you say? Eli wondered. Well, I told him that station wagons were out of style and people found industrial vans too large and cumbersome to drive. So why don't you make an automobile that's kind of a cross between the two? Call it a minivan. Grady said. He liked the idea and said he bounced it off his dad who ran the company. And? Eli asked. 2 years later, Martin Motors came out with the first minivan of any kind and sold more than 300,000 units in the first year of production. Of course, all the other car companies jumped into the minivan space as well, but it was still seen as a pioneer achievement in the automobile industry. Building an all-new make and model of vehicle out of thin air. From vapor to minivan, Grady proudly announced. Did you get anything out of it? Eli was remembering what he had learned from Monopoly about business and making money. Well, I did get the naming rights for the term minivan, which helped me get my sisters through college, but I didn't break the bank, if you know what I mean, Grady said. Eli nodded his head in an understanding way. Then he blurted out the first thought that popped into his mind, even though it wasn't about minivans. I rarely get to see my dad. He's like a ghost that floats in and out of my life, but I never really feel like I can grab his attention and get a hold of him. I know what you mean, son. I really do. My father was often in the same room with me, but I always wondered if he was really there for me. You know, did he have my back? I guess that's why I wanted to sit in his car, Eli said. I thought maybe, just maybe, I'd feel a little bit closer to him somehow. Well, do you, Junior? Grady asked. Do I what? You know, feel closer to your father. I'm not sure. It's complicated, Eli said. Their Saturday afternoon was fading to dusk, which meant that Eli needed to run back to the house for dinner. Grady opened his warm palm, crisscrossed with lines of age, inspected the silver key that was held in his palm. Then he slid it back into the old metal tackle box, flipped the brass latches closed, and nestled it in its hiding place. Finally, slowly, he dropped the wooden hatch down, level with the barn, and slid some of the loose straw over the top to cover it. The location of the key to the special car from Eli's dad's youth was once again a well-kept secret. Chapter 6, Family Tree.